Old man rhythm is in my shoes. It's no use to sitting and singing the blues. So be my guest, you've got nothing to lose. Won't you let me take you on a sea cruise? Ooh-wee, ooh-wee, baby. Ooh-wee, ooh-wee, baby. Ooh-wee, ooh-wee, baby. Won't you let me take you on a sea cruise? Feel like jumping, baby, won't you join me, please? I don't like begging, but now I'm on bended knee. I got to get to rock and get my hat off the rack. I got to boogie woogie like a knife in the back. So be my guest, you've got nothing to lose. Won't you let me take you on a sea cruise? Ooh-wee, ooh-wee, baby. Ooh-wee, ooh-wee, baby. Ooh-wee, ooh-wee, baby. Won't you let me take you on a sea cruise? I got to get to moving, baby, I ain't lying. My heart is beating rhythm and it's right on time. So be my guest, you've got nothing to lose. Won't you let me take you on a sea cruise? Ooh-wee, ooh-wee, baby. Ooh-wee, ooh-wee, baby. Ooh-wee, ooh-wee, baby. Won't you let me take you on a sea cruise? Feel like jumping, baby, won't you join me, please? I don't like begging, but now I'm on bended knee. Ooh-wee, ooh-wee, baby. Ooh-wee, ooh-wee, baby. Ooh-wee, ooh-wee, baby. Won't you let me take you on a sea cruise?
Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you. Bermuda, Bahama, come on, pretty mama. Key Largo, Montego, baby, why don't we go? Jamaica, off the Florida Keys. There's a place called Kokomo. That's where you wanna go to get away from it all. Bodies in the sand, tropical drink melting in your hand. We'll be falling in love to the rhythm of a steel drum band. Down in Kokomo, Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you to Bermuda, Bahama. Come on, pretty mama, Key Largo, Montego, baby, why don't we go? And then we'll take it slow. That's where we wanna go. We gotta go. Martinique, that Montserrat mystique. We'll put out to sea, and we'll perfect our chemistry. By and by we'll defy a little bit of gravity. Afternoon delight, cocktails and moonlit nights. That dreamy look in your eye, give me a tropical contact high. Way down in Kokomo, Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you to Bermuda, Bahama. Come on, pretty mama, Key Largo, Montego, baby, why don't we go down to Kokomo?
good evening and welcome this opportunity to officially welcome you to our beautiful Grandeur of the Seas and our beautiful great Gatsby dining room from behalf of your dining room staff. And I would like to give you a little information about our dining room staff. In our dining room we have 7 head waiters and 1 head waitress. And those are the ones who are in charge of the supervising, training. Ladies and gentlemen.
Vessel, Captain Ron Hampstead.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Okay. It must be raining outside. Yeah. So you're all here for, what are you here for?
Bingo.
Oh yeah, that's
Bingo.
right. That's right. Well, as a matter of fact, if you're interested in the ship as a ship from a technical standpoint, you're in the right place. So today what I do is I show a film, and what the film is, initially I show the film. It's a original promotional film that was filmed on Grandeur when Grandeur was built, way back in 1996. For all the Vision class ships, they actually filmed it on Grandeur itself. And it takes you for a tour through the ship, a little bit about how they built it, and so forth. But the very beginning of it is spliced in this ship, actually the Vision of the Seas, in dry dock. But it only shows the lower portion of the hull, and that's the part we're interested in. So that's what you see, is the ship out of the water. Not something we get to see very often. It's a ship completely out of the water. So it's rather fascinating to see. You'll see the propellers and the rudders and the thrusters and so forth. And then after that, I show a PowerPoint full of pictures, and then I talk a lot about each and everything, in case you missed something. And then at the end, I do question and answers with all of you. So if you have any questions, hang on to those questions. I'll try to get to them at the end. I'll have a few microphones around, and all you'll have to do at that point is raise your hand. I'll do my best to answer any of your questions. So anyway, without too much further ado, I think we could just go ahead and start with the film. So, thank you. Yeah, a lot of the things have changed on Grandeur since it was built. And in fact, one of the main things that has been actually removed from the ship is our DP, or Dynamic Positioning System. They mentioned it in the film. That has been disconnected and removed from the ship because we could never get it to work here on Grandeur. But we are a conventional ship, and instead we have propellers and rudders, and we don't have pods. And the new ships have pods. And the difference is that the pods don't have rudders, just propellers, and the propellers are what change direction. They actually rotate, and that's why they call them azipods, because they azimuth 360 degrees. But we have the old-fashioned propellers and rudders and thrusters, and which is fine, but it doesn't work very well with the dynamic positioning. And the dynamic positioning is a computer that really just takes a signal from the satellite, so it knows where it is, and then holds the ship in position. It takes actual control and holds the ship in position using rudders and the thrusters and the propellers, of course. So, anyway, today we're going to talk about the environment, go down to the engine room, then we're going to go back up to the bridge, then I'll ask you questions. Here's a few facts and figures for you. We were built way back in 1996 in Helsinki, Finland. Our gross tonnage, is 73,000 tons. That was before the dent. Gross tonnage is a measurement of volume. In fact, 1 gross ton is 100 cubic feet. And the reason that we measure ships in gross tons is because we don't really care what the ship weighs. We care what it can carry. That's really what matters in the commercial world. And in the Navy, now that we talk about deadweight tons or displacement tons, and that is more in line with what the ship weighs. Anyway, our overall length, 917 feet, and it's still that long as far as I know. And we are 106 feet wide, which means we are Panamax, which means we just fit into the Panama Canal. Panama Canal is 1,000 feet long and 110 feet wide. So we have 2 feet of clearance on either side. We just fit, and it's tight. And you should see the Radiance class. Now they're 960 feet, and they are also Panamax. So it's very tight for them, but they're also the same width. We can't really get any wider. Here is our draft. 7.8 meters, or about 25 feet. That's not much. We have 161 feet of air draft and only 25 feet in the water. So you might be wondering what's keeping us from rolling over. Me too. And we have over 3,000 people on board, guest and crew. That is true. And there we are next to our big sister. Give you a little bit of perspective. That's one of the Voyager class vessels, 140,000 tons. She's twice as big as us. There we are. Pretty soon Oasis is going to come out, and we're going to look like a lifeboat. And we have to watch out. They might just pick us up and take us away. Okay. Well, you know, on a cruise ship like Grandeur, we generate a lot of garbage, and we have to do something with it all. So what we do is we recycle as much as we can, and we recycle up to 70% of all the garbage. And what we do, of course, is we separate it in what we call the incinerator room, and it's all separated: bottles, cans, cardboard, plastic. And what we can't recycle, we toss into these hoppers here. There's 2 of them, and it is ground up, and it drops down into a big furnace. And this is the incinerator. And it is fed with a fuel line here, where we pump in waste oil, the waste oil that otherwise we could not burn otherwise. And then it is fed with a fan, so that it gets extremely hot. And so this garbage that ends up finally in the incinerator gets burned right down to ash. No matter what's in there, it burns down to ash. And then the ash is landed as garbage. And this way, nothing goes over the side. And there's a sample of some of the recycle. Every turnaround port, and Tampa is like a turnaround port for us, or it is a turnaround port for us. And that's a port where we usually fuel and we backload supplies. And the guests that have been on the cruise get off, and the guests that are coming on get back on. And that's what we call a turnaround port. We're turning around to go to the next cruise. And after we take on all these supplies, typically about 25 tons, we have to break it down because it's all in pallets and boxes and so forth. So we try to recycle all of that. And here, in fact, is even the straps for the deck chairs, because we restrap those all the time. So we're recycling that plastic as well. And there's some of it. There we are. When we talk about a ship like this, we not only generate a lot of garbage, but we also generate a lot of dirty laundry. And that's quite an undertaking. It's one of the biggest consumers of power and water. And it's a huge area down below on deck 1, and it's known as laundry. It's very labor intensive, but they get a little bit of help. And here is one of our 2 large folding machines. And everything we put in there, tablecloths, napkins, pillowcases, sheets, guy standing there, gets folded in about 3 seconds and comes out the other end. It's very efficient. Here's some of our big washing machines. They're big steam powered. These aren't the only 2, but they are steam powered, almost like big pressure cookers. There's the pressure hatch. And they cook your clothes very well. And they come out extremely white, as you can see, even if they weren't white before. This reduces our need for chemicals. And there's a big conveyor belt that takes it up to the next deck. It's quite an operation. It's like a factory. But when it comes to dry cleaning, we have to do it the old-fashioned way, and that is by hand. Okay. Well, as you know, we make the photos on board in the photo lab. We don't send them ashore by helicopter at the photomat and get them back 2 days later. They're done on board, right here. And we have pretty much all the latest equipment to do just that. We also have a print shop on board where we print all our flyers and the cruise compass and so forth. And here's a couple of the printers. And if you ever wondered where we got all the money to build all these new ships, these print in color. They've been very effective so far. And we have a hospital on board. Hopefully you haven't been down to see that yet. And if you did, I hope you don't remember. There's one of our many workshops on board. Grandeur is blessed with a lot of wood. Being an older ship, it's slightly older design. And all this wood takes a lot of maintenance. But it's a wonderful thing, and it adds such character to the ship, and I really like it for that reason. In fact, Grandeur is the last ship in the fleet to have a completely teak deck that goes all the way around. And that's something nice. We don't see that much anymore. And so, but that also takes a lot of work. So our carpenters are very busy. Now, we are diesel electric. So what we basically do is generate electricity and then distribute it throughout the ship. Everything is electric. The propellers that drive the ship are electric. The thrusters that we use for maneuvering, they're electric. Everything is electric. So those engines are down there chugging away, but they're generating electricity. So we have a chief electrician who works for the chief engineer and his team of electricians. And they have multiple workshops, but this is one of their bigger ones. And they too are a busy bunch. Everything you can imagine being electric. Oh, some more workshops. There's the plumber. And he gets busier as the years go by. Grandeur getting a little bit older, the pipes start to get a little bit less effective. They either start to rust through or clog up. And so that's quite a challenge for an older ship. If you were to look underneath all the ceiling panels, you would see many, many pipes and wires. Now these pipes are carrying everything from hot water to cold water, gray water, black water, steam, and the cooling lines for the fan rooms, carrying the cool brine, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And here's one of our cylinder heads. Picture slipped in there. On Grandeur, our engines are designed so that we can service them in progress or in service. And these are 12-cylinder, twin turbocharged diesel engines. And they need constant attention, as you can imagine. But we can't take them out of service for very long because we need them. And in fact, right now, we're running full speed and all 4 engines are working as hard as they can. And we can't really have one down for maintenance or we're going to be late. So we take the opportunity whenever we can. But usually when we're in port, we can remove one cylinder head, do a complete overhaul, and put it back. But we also have spares. So generally what we do is we rotate the spares. And we can overhaul an engine in the course of about a week, taking it a little bit at a time, each and every cylinder head as we go. Take the turbochargers, we have a spare turbocharger, we rotate those. And that's how it's done throughout. We do most of it on board. There's our upholsterer. He has a team of 2 other guys that work with him, 2 other upholsterers. And as I said, Grandeur getting older, a lot of the furniture needs to be reupholstered. And in fact, all the theater seats that we have here, there's about 1,000 of them, they've all been reupholstered since the ship was built, maybe even twice. And that takes a lot of work, and it's too much for just 3 guys. So he gets a little bit of help. And this is how we do many of the maintenance projects here on board Grandeur, whether it's laying carpet or what have you. And this is an example of what we would do. We have what we call riding teams that come on board, and they do specific jobs, and that's all they do. And in this case, all they were doing was replacing the suede headboards in your cabins. So 10 of them will come on board. They'll set up shop, in this case in the provision area, where it's a large area they can work, and they will go through the ship. And they'll do about 100 cabins a day. So over the course of 10 days, they can complete all 1,000 cabins and then move on to another ship. And so this is how we can take on these large projects. And like I said, we do the same for carpeting and some of the other maintenance issues that are too big for the team on board. We have a crew internet on board, just like up on deck 8. And we have an engine. Actually, we have 4 engines. And there's a picture of the control room, which you've already seen. And a lot of the software and equipment on board Grandeur has changed dramatically since it was built. And we all know that how far technology has come in the last 15 years. And in 1996, when Grandeur was built, it was still in the beginning stages. And typically a ship gets the technology from a year or 2 prior to, because it takes 18 months to 2 years to build a ship. And by the time it's complete, you know, some of the equipment isn't, I wouldn't say obsolete, but it's a little bit older generation. And so now after 13 years of Grandeur, a lot has changed. So we are upgrading all the time. And in fact, you probably wouldn't even recognize the control room if you were to place it back in time. So what do we have on board for power production? We have 4 big diesel generators, and they produce about 68,000 horsepower, or about 17,500 horsepower apiece. And we have 2 big large bow thrusters, and they are about 2,400 horsepower apiece. So we have 5,000 horsepower on the bow. And we have 1 stern thruster on the stern, and that is the same make and model. It's also 2,400 horsepower. And that's what we use primarily for maneuvering along with the propellers and the rudders. And to put that into perspective, the Voyager class, for instance, they have 4 bow thrusters to our 2. Ours are 2,400 horsepower apiece. Theirs are 4,000 horsepower apiece. So they have 16,000 horsepower on the bow. And that is tremendous amount of power. You would be hard-pressed to find a tugboat in any harbor with more than 5,000 horsepower. So, the ability to maneuver these ships in tight ports is critical. That's why we build the ships that are so maneuverable, because we're going to ports where there are no tugs, where the waters are shallow, the winds are blowing, and it's very confined. And we don't need to, or we want to take as little time as possible maneuvering, because our schedules are so tight. So as we build the new ships, we're making them actually more maneuverable than ever. So even though, for instance, the Voyager or Freedom or soon to be Oasis, they're so much larger, they are actually easier to maneuver by quite a bit than the older ships, particularly the Vision class ships. It can be quite a challenge. About 60% of all the power that we generate goes to pushing the ship, and the other 40% goes to everything else. And one of the large consumers, of course, is air conditioning. And those big compressors are running down there all the time, and they consume a lot of electricity. And one of the things that causes us to lose that energy is when we open our doors to the outside, and all that warm humidity comes in and blows away all that cool air conditioning. And then the compressors have to work hard again, and the power consumption goes up. Anyway, we have 2 big propellers, 4 blades each, and they turn outboard. What does that mean, they turn outboard versus turning inboard? Well, ships have a choice. You can design a ship to have inboard turning propellers or outboard turning propellers. And the advantage to outboard turning propellers is that they tend to be more maneuverable than the inboard turning propellers. But inboard turning propellers is actually just a little bit more efficient in pushing the ship. But we really need our maneuverability, so that's what we have. Okay, I won't go into freshwater production too much, but we produce about 50% of all the water on board is produced on board. So when we're in Tampa, we load freshwater, we top up our freshwater tanks. And then once we get out to sea, we're generating water as we go. And we generate this water from the waste heat that comes from the main engines. So all that heat that's coming out of the main engines is going up the smokestack and into the atmosphere. But we try to capture as much of that heat as possible. So we use a thing called an economizer, which is just a big heat exchanger that sits up in the smokestack, and captures that heat and makes steam, and then that steam is used to make fresh water. So we don't burn, the idea is to not burn fuel to make water. And that's why we bunker as much as possible. We have large boilers on board, so if we wanted to make a lot of water, we could. It would just cost a lot of money because we would burn all the fuel to make this water. So, for instance, if we're paying about $1 a ton in Tampa for water, it'll cost us about $6 a ton to make it on board using fuel. And that's the difference. Right now, we're making lots of hours with all 4 engines, full blast, and all that heat is going up into the economizer, and we're generating a lot of water. That's a good thing. And here we are. These are the low-pressure evaporators that generate this water. And a low-pressure evaporator is nothing more than a big containment vessel like you see here, with a slight vacuum pulled. When you pull vacuum in this container, you can boil water at a lower temperature and therefore generate the condensate that we use as fresh water. So we're making water out of seawater, but we're not filtering it necessarily, we're actually condensing it. And so this water that we generate is really pure. In fact, it's so pure that it's difficult to rinse off by mist. Now, sometimes when we switch into a tank, that's a tank we've filled on our own, as opposed to shoreside, the water is so soft that it's difficult to rinse the soap off, and that's how you would know the difference. Hard water is what we're all used to, and that's what you get when you pump it out of the ground. It's lots of minerals and so forth in it. Here we are in the engine room, looking down on 2 of our main engines. We have 2 big, complete, separate engine rooms. And the idea is that if any one big catastrophe were to happen in one engine room, we have a complete and separate, isolated engine room that will continue to produce the power that we need. And passenger ships like Grandeur are built to the highest standard of code in the world. And that is because we have so much human life on board. And it's critical that these ships are built to a standard that is safe. And so passenger ships are the most regulated ships in the world. These engines are big. They are about 35 feet long and about 25 feet high. And there's a big turbocharger. There's 2 of them, twin turbocharged, 12 cylinders each in a V configuration. And here we are pulling off one of the cylinder heads. There's the piston. And it's a push rod actuation to the cylinder heads, for those of you who know what that means. Fairly standard. The RPM of these engines is about 540 RPM. To put that into perspective, your car engine idles at about 900 to 1,000. And this engine turns at full speed at 540. But we still call it a medium-speed diesel because we have large diesel engines in this industry that turn much slower than that. And that is a slow-turning diesel. And of course, like I said, we do all this maintenance on our own. Here we are rebuilding one of the cylinder heads. And there's a can of WD-40 that no garage in America can go without, including my own. And there's a piston. And this piston is coming, of course, from one of our main engines as a spare. And that's what it looks like. And you can see all the black around it. And of course, that's some of the carbon that's built up from use. But it's also the black from the fuel, because we burn a really heavy, heavy black oil. That is the fuel that we burn. It's called heavy oil, otherwise known as CST 380. And it's about 3 steps up from the very bottom of the cracking process from crude oil. And at room temperature, this stuff is like tar. So we have to heat it up to burn it. And so we heat it up to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. That is very, very hot, boiling temperature being 212. And we're heating this up at 300 degrees using steam and electricity to keep the oil hot. And that makes it, thin enough to pump and separate. These are the big fuel oil separators. They're like big centrifuges spinning around, taking all the particles and so forth out, because the oil is not very pure. It comes from the refinery, and like I said, it's at the very bottom of the cracking process, and it has a lot of impurities in it. So we have to really filter it and put it through these separators to make it pure enough to pump into the diesel engines. Now, as you can see, there's not a lot of smoke that comes out of our smokestack, considering the fact that we're burning this heavy black oil. A marine diesel engine is probably the most efficient way to burn fossil fuel than any other possible way within a piston engine of these big diesels. That is efficient, and it's upwards of around 40%. Now, steam engines, for instance, back in the old days, steamships, they're getting about 10% efficiency from their fuel. So we have pushed the limits of our efficiency as much as possible. The fuel that we burn, this heavy oil, has twice the amount of BTUs or energy as gasoline per pound. So there's a lot of energy in this fuel. And the price of it, by the way, has gone down dramatically. When I left for vacation only 2 months ago, it was $600 a ton, approaching $650. And now it's down to $250. So it's changed dramatically. There's one of the big generators. The engines are on one side of the bulkhead, and a big shaft runs through the bulkhead to the generator on the other side. There's one of our big reefer compressors for the air conditioning. It's a closed loop system, so all the freon that is used here stays in that one little location. And what we do then is we chill brine, and brine is just nothing more than really salty water. It's so salty that it won't freeze. But it's very inert, being only salty water. If there's a leak or what have you, it's not that significant, as it would be if it were ammonia or freon. And so we keep this contained. It's called a closed loop system. One of our biggest consumers of power. Okay, we're going to go to the bridge now. Now at first we're going to do a medical evacuation. Now we don't do this very often, but you all got to witness the other day a medical evacuation. For those of you who didn't, this is kind of how it's done. When we position the ship, by talking to the pilot of the aircraft, we try to get the wind pretty much on the bow, maybe a little bit to port or a little bit to starboard, depending on which side he chooses to do this medevac. So, and then we clear off the area. So we're moving all the deck chairs, all the people, all the crew, all the guests, everybody away from that area. We clear it out, make sure there's no bits and pieces laying around. And then we station our mobile firefighting teams all around, ready with charged hoses, ready to go. Because in the event that the helicopter crashes into the ship, we have to be ready for that. And it's a very, very dangerous operation. With all the fuel on the helicopter and crashing into the ship, you could just imagine the catastrophe that would be. It's a very dangerous operation. Anyway, he comes over and hovers and lowers the basket, as you can see here. And then he lowers down as what they call a rescue swimmer. He comes down, he assesses the area. When it looks all okay, he tells the pilot it's okay, and then we bring the patient out, put him in the stretcher. And then what he does is he hovers over to the side here, and you can't see it, but the wire goes like so. So he tries to get a really good angle on this wire, so that when he picks you up, you get a big swing going like this. So if you didn't have a heart attack before you got in that basket, you've got one now. And then he flies you all the way back, like that. It's quite a ride. Just kidding. He actually pulls you up inside the helicopter and hopefully you make it home safely. That's not always the case, but that's what we try for. Here's our firefighting teams. We train ashore with real fire, and I wish I could show you some of the mock-up ships that we use that we set on fire and climb through and actually put fires out, liquid fuel fires inside these mock-up ships that are on land. We do this primarily in Fort Lauderdale, but it's a pretty realistic training. But we also drill on board every week or every cruise, and that is a scenario that we practice, of course, over and over, because fire is probably the most dangerous and most likely scenario on a ship like this. So we drill firefighting constantly, and we use Hollywood smoke. We have our little smoke machines, and we'll fill up a space with smoke, and we all play the role of, you know, what our responsibilities are, and it's like a big play act. But we get this thing going in a very realistic way, involving the entire crew. And it's a thing that goes on for about 2 hours or an hour and a half, depending on the scenario. We try to change the scenario each and every time. I don't know if any of you were on board when we did this, but that's how it's done. Now we also have to launch all the lifeboats once a month, both sides. So every other week we try to launch one side. And this last time we launched in Antigua, and we let the boats go and they hovered around in the area. But as you can see, launching the boat is actually quite easy. We just get in it and lower it down and release, and away you go. And you know, some of our lifeboat commanders are folks that you know. Our guest services manager, our cruise director, he's a lifeboat commander. Executive chef, lifeboat commander. So if you work on a ship like this, you have to have a certain amount of training. In fact, in those positions, you have to know how to drive a boat. And that's not always going to be the case, so we carry out a lot of training on board. Anyway, as you can see, when we lower the boats, they tend to scatter about and run aground on the reef, or drift out to sea, or sail around behind the ship where we can't see them and go into the harbor to look at the yachts, and then get chased out by the harbor master, or just crash into the ship. So we send out the rescue boat like a big sheepdog, and he herds them back. And I can tell you, it's like herding cats. It's not easy to get these boats back. They weren't designed to come back, in fact. They were designed to go down and leave the ship, and that's it. But it seems that we spend most of our time learning how to bring these boats back. Because that's the hard part. Maneuvering them back underneath the blocks so that we can hook them up and raise them back up on board. It's very tricky. And when there's no one in the boats except for the crew, and there's only 6, the boats are very light. And they're just high up out of the water, there's very little of it in the water, and they're susceptible to the wind like you wouldn't believe. And there's no rudders on these boats, there's just a little quart nozzle that rotates. So they're difficult to steer. The propeller is very small. The engine's only 35 horsepower, a little diesel, 3-cylinder diesel. And that's it. And so it's tricky. You definitely have to practice. Well, there we are on the bridge. That's me. There's a staff captain. There's a chief officer. There's a bridge officer. There's the quartermaster. He's steering, taking orders from myself. There's the lookout, looking in. And there's the cadet, hard at work, learning, hopefully. It takes a large team of us to maneuver this ship in and out of port because we all have responsibilities and we all have to be ready for the increased workload. What happens when we are out at sea is things, of course, are quiet, hopefully. And when they are, we only have 2 or 1 bridge officer up there with 1 lookout. And he's also a quartermaster, so he can steer if necessary. And that's daytime, in the middle of the ocean, no traffic, good visibility, fairly good weather. Now, at night, we increase that with 2 officers, a second officer and a first officer, and a lookout. Because at nighttime, visibility is less. There's usually a lot more things going on, a lot more phone calls and so forth, and the workload is higher. When we get into confined waters, or if there's lots of traffic and fog, rough conditions, or anything that would raise the workload, we go into what we call a yellow condition. And then that requires 1 senior officer to join the team, as well as 1 more lookout. So we'll have 2 quartermasters, senior officer, that would be either the chief officer, staff captain, or myself, and the first officer and second officer. Now, when we come in to maneuver or depart port, coming and going, we go into what we call red condition. And then that requires 2 senior officers, the 2 bridge officers, and the 2 lookouts. And quite often, we will have a pilot in there as well, drinking our coffee and talking a lot, otherwise getting in the way. In every port, we take a pilot. A pilot is something that we have to take. They're very experienced, not to, I make a joke, but really, they are usually ex-masters. They know the port better than anyone, and they are really the local advisors. And their role is to assist the master and to ensure that there's good communications and that they lower the risk for any kind of accident that would happen in the harbor. those of you from Tampa may remember when the ship crashed into the bridge, and the bridge came tumbling down, along with a bus and a few cars. Not good. All it takes is one little mistake, and it all comes crashing down. And that's a perfect example of just how bad it can get. So the pilot is there to make sure that we are communicating, that we're not heading into the shallow waters, that we, in fact, know where we're going. And you can imagine, for us, we come and go to the ports quite often. In fact, we know the pilots by first name basis. We know the ports very well. But imagine a ship coming into a port for the first time, and they don't speak the language. Let's say it's a Chinese container ship coming into the port for the first time. It doesn't speak the language, has never been to the port, doesn't see it. He may not even have accurate charts. And this is where the pilot really earns his money. And he comes on board to really make sure that they can communicate with ships that are coming out. And every ship having a pilot, therefore they can communicate. That's how it's done. Well, there's the ship's wheel. You probably imagine this big wooden wheel, you know, up on the poop deck. But that's not really the case. That's our little sports car wheel. Right now we're on autopilot. And all autopilot does is steer the course, but we only use that at sea. When we're in port or making our approaches and departures, we are on hand steering. We do everything by hand. There's no computer that takes over control of the ship and does the maneuvering for us. We do this by hand. Generally, it's myself or my delegate. I try to train the staff captain and the chief officer in maneuvering. So I usually give them the departures, and I sometimes do the arrivals, depending on the skill level of my officers. But I'm trying to train them up all the time, and that's how we do it. But here's one of our radars, and our VMS, which is this voyage management system, as we call it. And it's really just a glorified electronic charts. If you go into any marine store, you can buy yourself an electronic chart program, put it on your computer with a GPS, and there you go. But really what sets this apart is that it's integrated, so that all the equipment on the bridge is fed into this VMS. And that would be our gyro compasses, our wind indication, our depth finder also goes into this. All that information comes into this VMS. And this picture is not very good, you can hardly see it, but I will say this, the heading and the course over ground are different. The speed over ground and the speed through the water are different. Because we are floating, there's always going to be wind and there's always going to be current. So the ship it may be pointed, let's say, northwest, like we are now, and we're going through the Gulf Stream at this very moment. And there's about 4 knots of current setting us to the north. So even though we're headed northwest, we are pointed west, or even south of west. And we are crabbing along like this. And that's virtually the case almost continuously, unless there's absolutely no wind and no current, and that's almost never the case. So we're always crabbing along, and those two figures are always going to be different. And the GPS will give us the course over ground. The GPS is a wonderful instrument. It's this taking the signals from the satellite and therefore calculates the position for us and gives us a running position all the time. And that's not something that we've had actually for very long. We've had this for, well, 15 years. And prior to that, we had Loran as electronic navigation aid, which had a range of about 400 miles. Once you got out to sea, that's it, you're on your own. And out comes the sextant, and we do it the old-fashioned way. We still practice with the sextant because you never know when the satellites might stop working, and we're back to the old days, back to the Stone Age, as we would say. Well, you wanted to know why we don't roll over, and this is why. Because we have all the weight in the bottom of the ship. That's what's holding us up. But that weight is not really the machinery so much as it's the liquids. It's the fuel, it's the gray water, the black water, and mostly the ballast water and fresh water. So we fill our tanks with seawater just to make weight in the bottom of the ship so that we remain upright. something we want to achieve. Cruise ships are what we call tender ships. They're built on purpose with a high center of gravity so that they have a nice slow roll, like this, in any kind of a sea. You've probably noticed. If it were a cargo ship full of cargo and very heavy, and the center of gravity is very low, it's what we call a stiff ship. And that ship will roll very quickly. And on the upper decks, it would be so much motion that you would have difficulty standing up. And it would, in fact, be very dangerous. So we built these ships for comfort. But what that means is we raise the center of gravity, makes them tender, makes them comfortable, but we have to manage that center of gravity and make sure that that center of gravity doesn't go too high. So we are managing these tanks all the time, making sure that they're completely full or empty as possible. A tank that's half full actually has the effect of raising the center of gravity because of the free surface effect of that tank. Sloshing around can upset the stability of the ship. So we try to keep our tanks full or empty. We also have to make sure that we don't put all the weight in the middle. We have, or on the ends, we have the ability to put all the fluids or all the liquids on either end of the ship, and we will cause a condition called hogging. And that's where the middle of the ship is higher in the water than the ends. And it puts great stresses on the ship. If we put all the liquids in the middle of the ship and pump it out on the ends, we have what we call sagging in the middle. Also puts on lots of stresses and compression stresses on the ship. And if you do that enough times, you'll end up with two Grandeurs. You'll have Grandeur and Of the Seas. One of them will have the engines, the other one the wheelhouse. We'll know where we're going, we just can't get there. The engineers can get there, they just don't know how. One will have the windjammer, one will have the dining room, so we're okay. At least we can eat. There we are on the bridge wing. That's the bridge wing controls. I don't know if any of you were up on deck 10 whenever we're maneuvering, but we do it from the bridge wings so that we can see down the side of the ship. And we have all the controls to do that, and nothing more, the bare minimum out here. So we have control of the thrusters, the engines, and the rudders. We have a repeater for the VMS up here so we can watch ourselves on the chart as we maneuver into the harbor. We also have a window in the deck so that we can look down onto the pier and wave at the line handlers or gesture. They tend to be a little slow, and sometimes that can be quite irritating when you're trying to get the lines on the ship and hold it alongside, and they're taking their time putting the spring line on, taking their time walking back to the bow line, and so forth. In the meantime, we're thrusting and twisting and holding the ship alongside and praying to God that the wind doesn't come up. You probably noticed in St. Kitts that if you were up early enough, we had about 45 knots of wind and driving rain just minutes before coming alongside. Not a good thing. Our wind limit on Grandeur is 25 knots on the beam. After that, we don't have enough power to hold the ship in position in those kind of winds. So with 45 knots of wind just before making the maneuver, we're at the mercy of the wind. So I tried to bring the ship up to the wind while the squall passed. Unfortunately, it did pass, and I was able to continue the maneuver back into the pier. But that's always something you really have to watch out for. We have a limited amount of power, and we have no tugs in St. Kitts. Well, there's a coffee pot. Very important piece of equipment on the bridge. No ship can go without that. We keep that one working. Now, on the deck 3 aft, these are the mooring deck. These are the mooring lines. This is an area you don't get to see. This is a picture of our mooring lines, which are synthetic fiber. Actually, it's quite related to carbon fiber, or what we call Kevlar. It's very, very strong, very light, and very slippery. And it lasts a good long time. So these ropes are actually stronger than steel. And they have the advantage of stretching just a little bit, because that's what we want. We want a little bit of stretch, because the ship is always going to move against the pier a little bit, particularly in St. Martin, where there's a big swell coming in all the time, and the ship is moving against the pier like this, and those lines are stretching and creaking, and you can hear them. And that's what we want. So these are the winches. This is the stern anchor. We also dive underneath the ship to inspect the hull. So there we are. We're going down and looking at the thrusters as an example. Make sure there's no small sailboats or fishing boats caught up inside there. And praying to God nobody turns it on. That would be quite something. Give the shark something to chew on. There we are swimming around those propellers. It's very intimidating to swim underneath the ship, I can tell you. So we try to do it in Cozumel, where the water is very clear and we can see very well. But you know, in most ports, we're only 2 meters off the bottom alongside the pier. That's not much. And when you swim underneath, it gets very claustrophobic, let's say. You want to see the galleys? Okay. Here they are, the 3 cooks. They cook all the food. And they're smiling too. Hard at work. And he washes all the dishes. Busy guy. It's like he's missing a tooth. Well, you know, the galleys are very hard to photograph because it's all stainless steel and it's full of little cubby holes and corners and so forth, and you just can't take a photo of it and say, here it is, here's the galley. That's not really what it looks like, and so it's very difficult to take this photo. It doesn't come out very well. Well, you know, when we're down in the Caribbean, we have to consider what it is with hurricanes. We're always trying to avoid these hurricanes, and during hurricane season, it can be quite challenging. So here is an example of one of the hurricanes, and this was Hurricane Wilma. And do you know how they name hurricanes? No? They take a satellite photo of them. And this was Hurricane Wilma. That's how they name hurricanes. I'm waiting for Hurricane Fred. That's quite remarkable. I don't see that every day. Well, you know, Cozumel got beat pretty hard with this Hurricane Wilma. I don't know if any of you have been there. Maybe you have. Another shot of downtown. It's amazing how much they've rebuilt Cozumel. Put a lot of effort into it, and you wouldn't even hardly notice it now. Now that we've rebuilt our pier, and this was our pier, still is, and it's standing, and of course we've rebuilt it now so it can take the oasis of the seas alongside. So we've made it wider and longer, and it's a really nice pier now. Carnival's pier was over here, and it got completely destroyed and is underwater. You can see it. They're rebuilding it, and they'll have it up and running fairly soon, I would imagine. I haven't been to Cozumel in about 6 months. So we'll see. We'll see in a few days, actually. Well, you know, this was our donation to the kids at school in Haiti. And in fact, in Tortola, we donated our 2008 donation to the orphanage there in Tortola. It was quite something. We had about 40 crew members turn out. I went and gave a little speech. We gave them $6,000 and lots of toys. Thank you, and that's for the crew, because the crew were the ones that generated the money through raffles and sales of various items to generate this revenue so that we could donate. And that's, it's a great thing. It's something we do every year. Some of the money that we, well actually all the money that we get from the recycle goes into the crew welfare fund. So that money is, there's incentive, in fact, to recycle as much as possible, because we get the money for that. Well, do any of you remember when there was a big dent in Grandeur of the Seas? You've probably been here before. We have a lot of repeat guests on board Grandeur. Yeah, we had a big dent. The big dent, as you can see. Do you know how we got the dent? Do you want to know?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first off, I wasn't here. But according to the captain who was, The ship was minding its own business off the pier in Costa Maya, Mexico. And out of nowhere, the pier hit the ship. Imagine that. Well, it took us a long time to get it fixed. And we finally did a year ago, last April. We came into dry dock, got the ship out of the water, and they had a piece already made, pre-cut, pre-welded, all ready to go. So when we came in, we cut out this big piece, cut out the old dent, welded in a new piece, and there you go, and you can't even tell. That was up on the starboard side, you can't even tell now. So I'm so glad that dent is gone. I can tell you. Well, that's it. Thank you very much. Now it's your turn. And if you have any questions, this is your chance. So just raise your hand and hopefully we'll get you a microphone and I'll do my best. If we can get them to work.
First question up here, Captain Rob, on the right-hand side balcony.
Okay.
Which college did you go to?
What college did I go to?
Yes.
The College of Hard Knocks. I went to the Merchant Marine Academy in California. Way back when.
Schuyler.
Fort Schuyler, okay. Very good. Yeah, I got out in, I was class of 1985. And you?
You're truly the place of hard knocks. United States Army.
Okay. Very good.
Captain Rob, we have one at the back. Down here.
Oh,
Right here. Go
okay.
ahead.
Go ahead.
I just would like to know, from Tampa back to Tampa, how far is that altogether?
That was 3,162 miles. 10 feet and 3 inches. Not bad.
Okay, just here, Captain Rob.
How often do they rotate the captain from the ship to a new ship?
Well, we generally spend about 3 years or so per ship. And that's a general rule of thumb. We have some captains that have been on our ship since it was built, and others move around much more frequently. I've been on Grandeur now for over 2.5 years, approaching 3 years. And I'll probably be here for another year, I would expect. That's about how we do it.
We have a question.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Last night, and I think maybe the night before, wee hours in the morning, 4 or 5 o'clock, something like that, we were cruising along, just felt about like this, and boom! Did we hit a speed bump, a whale, or something?
Oh, those bangings that you hear every now and then are just small fishing boats and sailboats. Nothing to worry about. They sometimes get caught up in the anchor, it's a mess. Nothing to worry about. Really, it's just the sea slapping the side of the ship. It sounds solid, but it's not. It's the sea, it hits the ship just right and makes a kind of popping, banging, and that's what you're getting.
All right, back here, Captain Rob.
You talk about the importance of maneuverability. No, Tampa is rather shallow and narrow, the channels. What, in your opinion, are several of the hardest ports of call for you to get into and out of?
Good question. Well, ports usually that have a lot of current and wind. Key West can be a challenge. Any port can really be a challenge when the wind comes up. We are most susceptible to wind because we have so much sail area on the ship, as we refer to it, so we're very prone to the wind. And also the current. The current is equivalent, 1 knot of current is equivalent to about 25 knots of wind. So if we have 2 knots of current, that's like having 50 knots of wind. That's a lot. So we really have to mind what we call the environmental forces, the wind and the current. And some ports have a lot of it. Now, Tampa is a challenging port when it's windy. When it's not, of course, it's not so bad because there's not a lot of current. But there can be a lot of wind and fog. And we're hoping for no fog tomorrow, by the way. The forecast is heavy fog. So I'm going as fast as we can to get in as early as possible because it's in the morning when the fog settles down. And of course, the fog reduces visibility to 0, and then they close the port. So let's hope to God we can get in early enough. Anyway, that's one of the things that can make a port challenging. Also, the channel is so narrow that we have to go so slow because there's tankers usually berthed along the side. There's also a dry dock there. And they're pumping oil, and they have lines connected. And if we go by too fast, we will actually pull them off the pier. The suction from the ship passing by will pull the ship and break the lines, and you can imagine what would happen then. So we have to slow way down. We're down to 3 knots, which is like 4 miles an hour or less. That's walking speed. Now, when we're going that slow, we are more prone to the wind than ever before. So what happens is we end up with a big crab angle because we have to put the bow to the wind or we get set down. And the channel being so narrow, we can't get that much of a crab angle, and what we refer to as the swept path of the ship becomes wider than the channel itself. And we can't do that. So there is a limit to how much the wind we can take, but also the direction of the wind. If it were blowing straight down the channel, then we would have the bow already into the wind going down the channel, and then therefore it's much safer regardless of the strength of the wind. But having it on the side is a completely different story. The great thing about Tampa is we have a lot of tugboats available, and they're powerful. They have several tugs, tractor tugs that are 5,000 horsepower, and they're available on fairly short notice. So if we run into that condition, I can usually get a tug.
Captain Rob, over here to your left. Right over here to your left.
That's port.
Yeah, so you've ever done the International Safety Management System and the Stringline Inspection Program?
Oh boy, okay, this is a test. Yes.
All right, next question here, Captain Rob.
When you put the lifeboats out to be checked to see if they're working properly, or to check out the way how the crew is maneuvering with lifeboats, you're using the fuel that is in the motor in the back. Do you refuel it immediately when it comes back, or you wait until the next time you have another trial?
Well, I'll put it this way. Those little diesel engines burn so little fuel that we probably burn just about half a gallon per boat. It's so little that we don't fuel them each and every time. But we always make sure that there's enough fuel in there, of course, to meet the requirements, which is 24 hours of motoring at 6 knots. But there's enough fuel in there to probably do half again as much as that. So we don't refuel them each and every single time. But we do frequently keep them topped up, and that's a must, for sure.
Just here, Captain Rob.
How do you dispose of the salt from your desal plant?
Well, what we're doing is we're condensing the water, so we're not actually generating real salt. What we're doing is cycling through seawater, right? So the seawater that we pump aboard comes out the other side a little bit saltier, and that's how we do it.
Right here, Captain.
When we had the medical emergency with the helicopter, where did they fly that passenger to? We were curious.
They flew him to the Turks and Caicos, and that was the nearest island, Grandeur. And it's just it's just northeast of where we were by about 50 miles or so. And there's a long story about that. The Navigator of the Seas was behind us about 20 miles. They were also conducting a medevac just by chance and just by coincidence. It happened to be at the same time. So I was trying to get their helicopter to come to us after they had picked up their guest. And they were on their way. And they turned around at the very last minute. They were less than a mile away. You could see them there. And they had to turn around because their guest got critical on board the helicopter. So they had to go and drop him off and refuel and come back. And in the meantime, I turned to the north and tried to close the distance to this helicopter so he'd come back faster. And that's how we did it. And of course, that increased the distance to San Juan. and of course the time it took and so forth. That raised our required speed up to a point where we couldn't actually make it their schedule.
We have a question back here, Captain Rook.
I was up on the deck when we went under the Sunshine Skyway on the way out. How much clearance do you have? It looked like about 2/3 of an inch from where I was at.
Well, it's more than that. It's that bridge is 185 feet, and we're 161 feet. So believe it or not, I have about 24 feet. Of course, that depends on a little bit of tide you get.
Yeah.
It's still, that's actually pretty good, but some of the bridges we go under, it's a lot less than that. In fact, there's some bridges we can't get under unless we go really fast.
Right here, Captain Rook. Just to your right.
Star?
Captain, I have a twofold question. My first one is, how many lifeboats do you have on this ship? And what's their capacity? And my second question is, does the old adage still hold true? Women and children first, and men if they're lucky later?
Yes.
Yes, that still holds true. Women and children first. We have 16 lifeboats and they hold 150 each. We also have 64 life rafts and they hold 25 each. So we have quite a bit of extra on board.
Captain Rock,
Hopefully we won't need them, huh?
right here.
Yes, this morning around 4:30, on the port side, we saw lights. Did we see Cuba or islands off of Cuba?
Yes, you saw Cuba. You saw the light.
Yeah, we've got quite a few more questions just over this side. All right, just right here.
Sometimes I'm not sure what I hear, but I thought the other night when I was eating, I heard someone say that Cuba was going to be on the starboard side, and I was wondering how it got there, but I think you answered the question.
I was on the port side last time I checked.
Just here, Captain Rook, in front. Port.
How long does a ship stay in service?
Many, many years. In fact, well, in our fleet, in Royal Caribbean, we keep the ships within our fleet about 20 years on average. And then we will sell them to one of our subsidiaries, which in this case would be Pullmantur. Pullmantur Cruises is a Spanish cruise line we bought several years ago. So we just sold the Sovereign of the Seas this fall, this last November. And the Majesty and Monarch will be next. And we also now retired the Nordic Empress, or Empress of the Seas. So Sovereign and Empress are now gone from our fleet, Empress being our smallest ship and the only one that could get into downtown Bermuda. But they're now with Pullmantur, and Pullmantur is, of course, taking our older ships, but to Pullmantur, they're nice new ships. So they're retiring their old ships. And then you would say, well, where do those ships go? Well, good question. It depends. They may end up in the scrapyard and be recycled. Or they may end up in Asia as a floating hotel or a casino or something of that nature. But old ships eventually go to be recycled and scrapped.
To your starboard side, Captain Rook.
Have you seen anything of the Russian warships that are supposed to be traveling between Venezuela and Cuba?
No, I haven't. Yeah, that's good. That's good. No, they, well, it may have gone to the south coast, in which case we wouldn't have seen them anyway, because they're going up through the Caribbean, and we're actually north of Cuba. So if that were the case, we wouldn't see them.
Right over here, Captain Rob.
First, thank you very much for spending this much time with us. My question is this: during your career as a captain of a cruise vessel, what is one of the most memorable problems you've had to overcome on a cruise to make it a success?
Wow, good question. You know, every cruise is different, and every cruise has its challenges. And some cruises just don't seem to go right no matter what you do. whether we have multiple medevacs, bad weather, missed ports, hurricanes, fog, you name it, engine breakdowns, and sometimes it just conspires to happen all in one cruise. And you know, that's just the way it goes sometimes. And I can remember a few cruises like that. So it seems to happen in groups, though. You know how it is in threes. Yes. We've had our challenges at the cruise, sure. But we made it so far.
Just here on the port side, Captain.
Is there a plan to refurbish the ship at some time or other?
Yes, usually after about 15 years, our ships get refurbished with a major investment. Because we keep them for about 20, so we're refurbishing it for the next 5 years or more, and to keep it up to standard. And we've done that with the mega class ships, and we'll be looking at the Vision class ships the same way in the future. But we're also, after we retire what we call the mega class ships, which are Sovereign, Majesty, and Monarch, we will start retiring the Vision class ships. But they will be replaced, as I understand it, with ships of equal size. So they'll be like an enhanced Radiance class vessel. That will be the type of vessel replacing the Vision class ship. So we will always have ships of this size in our fleet, which I think is a good thing, because I like ships of this size.
We've got time for a couple more, Captain. Just
Okay, one more.
one more right here on the port side.
All right.
When it comes to navigation, what do you have for a backup? Is it two systems of the same, or do you still have an older system on board?
No, you're right. We have what we call redundant equipment. So we have two of everything, at least. So if any one piece of equipment fails, then we have the other. If that fails, and it's also on a battery system, so if we lose power, we still have the battery power to run all the equipment at the bridge. If that fails, we have the old-fashioned sextant, and we can still navigate our way around. Gyro compass is also on the battery, so we have a compass. We also have a magnetic compass. So we really have the basics, as we've always had, as a true backup. But we also have double of every piece of electronic equipment we have.
Do you still have a LORAN or not?
No, we got rid of the LORAN a long time ago. They don't even send the signal anymore. So, yeah, that's over. Well, thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you once again to Captain Beryl for spending so much time with us this afternoon. Thank you.
I'll be here for a few more minutes if you wish to say hello or whatever you like. Take a picture. That's fine. Thank you.
Certainly bring your cameras down.
I don't think it's still as many as we found out. More than left.
Record you while you scream.
Bingo. I want the bingo.
Bingo. Come on. Okay.
Dave, can you hand your coffee over here? My wife wants to see
What? Coke?
No. I gotta be careful what I say because he's
You're on video now.
Uh-oh. You gotta behave yourself now. He's got evidence.
Winner.
What'd you win?
What'd you win?
5 and a 5.
Good show.
$10?
What'd you win?
Yeah, great.
Good.
Did you win the 1,000, 5, whatever? You won 10? What'd it cost you?
5.
Cool.
That's it. We got it. The jackpot. Oh.
All right.
This one was a pit.
I'm not kidding with the fact that she stalked me to bingo and wasn't even going to play. Come on up here, and Rebecca being our lucky gentleman as well. Now we're going to double check these cards. Remember, it is the easiest game to bongo on, so make sure you stay right where you are. We've got our 2 winners coming to the stage. We also have the lovely lady that's giving away the cash today. This is Dawn from your M&R team, Marketing and Revenue. Now, JJ, who have we got here? This is Colette, everybody. Colette that wasn't even gonna play. Came along and she's on stage. We also have one of our regulars over here. Who have you got there, Becky? Al. Al and Colette, come and join me on this side.
From Virginia.
From Virginia. Come on over, and we've got JJ and Dawn are going to check the cards just there. I hope you got my whole hat in there. All right. In the B's, we do not want to see 12 or 13. That's good?
Yep.
Both cards are good. In the I's, we do not want to see 16, 21, 24, or 29. That's good?
That's a good.
All right, in the N's, 33, 39, 40, or 44. That's good?
Good end.
In the G's, there's 2 left, 49 and 50. Good?
The G.
All right, now this is for the money. We're going to split it right down the middle, $4,928.05. We do not want to see these 3 numbers, 63, 64, or 65. So good claims of bingo. All right, let's hear it for them. Colette and Al are taking out that cash. Thank you so much for playing this afternoon. If you've got the electronic cards, please take them back out to the terminals for us. Thank you so much for playing. We'll see you back here for the farewell spectacular showtime. Make sure you're in the house early. They do that cruise review on the screen. Also some of our Christmas stuff as well. We'll see you back here tonight for both shows.
Attention, that Neil made it. Look at this one away. Oh, I was 2 away.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Can't get back far enough.
Okay.
There we go. I got it. Okay.
Mr. Everton. All right, we'll get the ice for you, yeah?
Thank you.
They got to go without it.
Yeah, it's good. It comes out. Okay. You can't hide from this, Jim. Nope.
What are you getting?
What?
Roger getting the steak?
No. I'm gonna just get one soup. Hold up the menu there.
What else do you like? You can get both.
Okay, this is the menu. This is tonight's menu.
Get surf and turf.
Let's see. Here's the starters.
See, we'll pick for you.
What are you gonna? What am I gonna have?
Yeah.
Okay. Our last meal. Our last meal together on the ship.
Yes, our last supper.
Last supper.
Last supper.
Unfortunately, your last evening here with us here in the dining room. Now, standing on the staircase behind me, ladies and gentlemen, we brought him out from the back of the house. How about a nice big round of applause for our talented executive chef, Mr. Marcus, all the way from Australia. And we also have his right-hand man, that is our executive sous chef here on board, that is Mr. Courtney, all the way from Jamaica, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Marcus and his team have been working extremely hard back there in the galley preparing all that wonderful food during the past 10 days. That's breakfast, lunch and dinner here in the dining room. The huge operation upstairs in the Windjammer Cafe, they're open more than 12 hours a day upstairs, ladies and gentlemen. We're also in charge of room service and the solarium. So ladies and gentlemen, how about a nice big round of applause one more time for Marcus and his team, working extremely hard, enjoying the food. And we also have on the staircase standing behind me, ladies and gentlemen, we have the man who is fully responsible for all those little calories that have been creeping into your diet over the past 10 days. All those wonderful desserts you've been enjoying, ladies and gentlemen, that is our head pastry chef, Mr. Patrick, all the way from India. Well, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes down to the service, I'm sure that you got to know your team very, very well over the past 10 days. Not only here in the dining room, but I'm sure that you met your assistant waiters also up in the Windjammer Cafe. Now, their target from day one of the cruise was to provide you with wonderful service, with a lot of attention, ladies and gentlemen, with a big smile on their face, and also obviously that little bit of entertainment I'm sure that you enjoyed earlier on in the cruise, ladies and gentlemen. So over the past 10 days, ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you one more time, how have you enjoyed all the wonderful service here in the dining room, all the wonderful service in the Windjammer? We hope you had a great time with us. Wonderful.
How you doing, Dad?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, and obviously also the galley team standing on the staircase, we'd all like to wish you a very safe and pleasant journey home tomorrow, and of course hope to see you back here on the Grandeur of the Seas in the very near future, or indeed on any other of our Royal Caribbean ships sailing around the world in the very near future as well. So ladies and gentlemen, now for the final time for this cruise, your dining room staff and galley staff have all come together because we'd now like to sing for you our little farewell song, and it's called Hey Look Us Over.
Looks good. It looks really good. Wow. Wow. Now this is.
What is it? Oh. Then I don't. No, that's okay. Thank you.
This is strawberry shortcake. Key lime pie. Key lime that slid. Okay, now key lime pie. Oh, and that's. And for ladies and gentlemen, it's Roger.
The blimp.
No, it's our last night together, and we're pigging out.
Still get you.
We've had a great trip.
And enjoying every bite of it.
Absolutely. Uh-oh, there's Beryl stealing a little bit now. Uh-oh, we got her. Okay, this is Dave's second key lime pie.
Uh-oh.
And we're fixing to dig in, and then it's really going to be back to the diet tomorrow. Okay, this is almost it, folks.
Yep.
It's been fun.
It's been fun.
It's been fun.
We enjoyed it.
It's been fun.
Good cruise.
Good cruise.
It's been a blast.
It's been a blast.
Great company.
They call him Flipper, Flipper, faster than lightning. you see is smarter than he. And we know Flipper lives in a world full of wonder, flying there under the sea. Everyone loves the king of the sea, never so kind and gentle is he. Tricks he will do when children are near, and how they laugh when he's near. They call him Flipper, Flipper, faster than lightning. No one you see is smarter than he. And we know Flipper lives in a world full of wonder, flying there under the sea.
We are 5 minutes away from the helicopter's arrival. I believe Carlos, our facilities manager, just seen the helicopter in the distance coming in. So you can see the teams already behind us. We've got fire teams in place 1 and 2. The pool deck has been cleared right now. So this is where it's all going to get a little crazy around here right now. And you can imagine how much wind is going to be created from the helicopter. So are you seeing it? It's way in the distance. You're probably not going to see it yourself right now. But we're going to cut away right now so I can give Curtis a chance to catch the helicopter coming, all right? So stick around. Basically, they've brought down the basket ready to load our guest into it. Of course, the helicopter is now just pulled back away for safety reasons. And once we get everything set, they'll come back in. As you can see, there's a lot of noise, of course, when the helicopter's in close. So you're just really seeing what's going on. It's pretty straightforward, really. They'll attach then and send her up in the basket, and they'll get her away safely to the hospital. So there you go. Stick around, guys. Fire teams have stood down right now and preparing the pool deck again, getting all the chairs back out. Security and safety, of course, are standing down. As you can see, the operation was successful. We managed to get everyone up in the helicopter as safely as possible. And I just want to thank everybody out there, you guys, for your help, cooperation, and understanding. Apologies for any inconvenience, but of course, the situation warranted us having to obviously do an evacuation. So again, thank you for your patient understanding. Bye.
Red sails in the sunset, way out on the sea. Oh, carry my loved one home safely to me. She sailed at the dawning. All day I've been blue. Red sails in the sunset. I
I'm trusting in you. Swift wings we must borrow, make straight for the shore. We'll marry tomorrow, and she'll go sailing no more. Red sails in the sunset, way out on the sea. Oh, carry my loved one home safely to me. Red sails in the sunset, way out on the sea. Oh, carry my loved one home safely to me.
Those melodies that reach across the years have underscored our laughter and our tears. With every phrase we see the past unfold like memories in gold. Some tunes remind us of our childhood days, the Sunday afternoons and songs of praise, reflecting happy times and joys untold. These memories in gold, from those early nursery rhymes through our adolescent times, we'd find more favorites as we went along. How could we go wrong with a special song that would always see us through? Our lives without them might be cold and bleak. A favorite song says more than words can speak. They help me win your love to have and hold. Sweet memories in gold.
When the band played rock and roll and the people called it so, our favorite songs were like a tapestry,
Etched in melody, they would always be part of you and part of me. There's little more to add when songs are sung. The words and music help keep us young, and so we're not afraid of growing old. With memories, let's hear them please. Sweet memories in gold.